So thank you so much for joining us tonight for our first virtual panel discussion. My name is Angie Balsarini. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for Film Streams. We're a mission-driven nonprofit, and we're dedicated to the presentation and discussion of film as an art form. So with our two cinemas currently temporarily closed in consideration of public health concerns, we've had the opportunity to explore different and creative ways to fulfill our mission. So we're excited tonight to be collaborating with some terrific distributors to bring a bit of the Film Streams experience to your home with our home movies programming options. Currently, we have 12 different offerings available for you to rent digitally from our website, with a portion of each digital ticket sale supporting our organization. One of those is the focus of tonight's discussion, and hopefully you've had the opportunity to watch this film. If not, you can still stay for the discussion and check out the film later. I'm gonna play a brief trailer though, just to catch anybody up in our audience that that is not familiar with the film or didn't get the chance to see the film. So.
As important as 2008 was, 2010 was to be a more important election. 2010 is a census year, and we redistrict every state and congressional seat following the census.
You win state legislatures in 2010, you get to draw the new maps that control all the elections over the next decade.
The winner is pre-decided just by the way that the districts are drawn.
Even under the scenario of the Democrats winning the vote by the biggest margin they've ever won in modern Wisconsin history, the Republicans would still get 59 seats minimum. That's an astonishing manipulation of democracy.
Congress would never fix this problem because they have one interest only, and this is to stay in power.
It's the biggest heist in modern American political history.
I'm Katie Fahey. I'm with an organization called Voters Not Politicians. We started from a Facebook post.
I saw that there was a pent-up energy, so I just thought I'd, try.
First there was 10,000, then there was 20,000, and this thing just sparked.
We're working with the anti-gerrymandering drive.
They're absolutely worried about us. They know that once this gets on the ballot, it almost always passes.
This is going to be the battlefield moving forward. If they lose, it's no holds barred.
There will be a vicious fight by the people who are in power.
We are seeing efforts to undermine the very core values of American democracy.
This may be the last time we have an opportunity to do something about partisan gerrymandering.
The people of our country are sick of this, and if we don't come and say that enough is enough, then nothing's gonna change.
So a little brief synopsis on it. So Slay the Dragon is a new documentary that shines a light on the radical gerrymandering practices and the grassroots efforts to fix this broken system. So the really great thing about my job as community engagement manager is that through our community development program, I get to connect local organizations to our programming. So fostering dialogue about important community issues in our community. And tonight, we're so grateful to be partnering with the ACLU of Nebraska, Civic Nebraska, and the University of Nebraska at Omaha, two different departments, Service Learning Academy, and Jody's with the UNO Political Science Department. So to bring together a conversation about voters' rights in our state. Also, please don't hesitate to interact with us on this platform. I'll be looking in the comments section for questions directed at any of our experts. And then, so next to introduce you to Kirsten Case Fuller. She is our fantastic moderator for tonight and is my friend and local diversity leader. She's the community liaison of the Service Learning Academy at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. She has over 25 years of experience working within the nonprofit community, with 19 years focused on community engagement and 12 years on nonprofit leadership experience. I knew that she would be the perfect choice for our fantastic moderator position to facilitate this conversation because of her thoughtful insight and her passionate advocacy for civic engagement. So hi, Kirsten, thank you. Take it over.
Yay. Well, thank you for that very warm introduction. And I just want to thank everybody who's watching us tonight live, but also those of you who may be joining us later on to watch this recording, for being a part of this really important conversation. I would think that for all of us that are on tonight, we would want you to walk away with knowing that we all have a role to play in this, especially here in our own community, but also that we all have an opportunity to do that regardless of what our position or title is. And so that's something that's really important to me. And I know that we want to, at the end, we'll have a call to action. And so it'll be an opportunity to think about ways that you can be engaged in this topic and in helping out in our community. So we're really lucky to have a fantastic panel tonight. Some that I know better than others, but I'm so thrilled to be a part of this. We've got Danielle Conrad, who's the executive director from the ACLU, Brad Christian-Sallis from who's the voting rights field director for Civic Nebraska, and Jody Neathery-Castro. Sorry guys, this is my first time moderating, especially on Facebook Live, who's the chair of the UNO Department of Political Science. So we're gonna jump right in and get started. So I'm actually gonna ask our panelists to do a very quick introduction about themselves. I think that hitting on your tie to this particular topic too is really important. For me, I think that part of why I'm a part of this is that engagement piece. So that's a part of not only my work life, but also my personal life, is how can we get folks involved in the community in ways that are meaningful to them. And so who are you, what's your role, and why is this topic important to you? So Brad, do you mind starting us off?
Yep, I'll get us started. I'm Brad Christian-Sallis. I'm the voting rights field director at Civic Nebraska. The reason why I really care about this issue is because as a kid, my mom, when I would get in trouble, my punishment would be I would have to read and then write stories about different civil rights leaders. And during that time as a kid, whenever I was in trouble, which was a lot, it really just instilled to me how important the right to vote is, and how important each of our voices is. And what gerrymandering does is it takes away from that voice that each of us is supposed to have. And so I feel like anything I can do to help move us towards a place where our vote is counting the way it should be, the way the people I used to read about and have to write essays on wanted it to work, then I'm doing what I should. So that's kind of why I'm here and happy to be here.
That's awesome. And I always feel that passion when I have the pleasure of working with you through Civic Nebraska on voting rights advocate work. And I can always feel that passion in the work that you do and how much you care about that. Thank you. Danielle, do you mind going next?
Sure. Well, it's always hard to follow Brad, but I would follow him anywhere. So, and I'm going to take a chapter out of your mom's playbook and add that to my mom playbook. So thank you for that. That's very, very helpful. Hi, my name's Danielle Conrad. I'm the executive director of the ACLU of Nebraska. Yay! I've been in this role for about 5 years. And we've done a lot of work around voting rights and voter suppression and redistricting reform in partnership with folks like Brad at Civic Nebraska, the League of Women Voters, Nebraska Appleseed, the Holland Children's Movement, the list goes on and on. There's a really robust coalition in Nebraska working on voting rights, and it's always a pleasure to work with them on those issues. This issue in particular is near and dear to my heart personally, because the last time Nebraska went through redistricting, I had the honor to be not only a member of the legislature, and I served the Fightin' 46 legislative district of North Lincoln for 8 years, but I was selected by my peers to be on the redistricting committee. So I was one of 9 members who had a front and center view on how redistricting worked in Nebraska at that point in time. And I'll tell you, my takeaways from that experience was that activity was such an outlier when it comes to how our beautiful, unique, nonpartisan legislature works for the most part, where we really do put aside our partisan differences and focus on good policy for the state, where we do our work in a transparent manner, out in public view, and where we really take to heart citizen input and engagement. And almost from start to finish, everything about the redistricting process was just really antithetical to everything I knew and loved about the Nebraska legislature. It was hyper partisan, it was super secretive, it was really divisive, and public input wasn't really taken to heart in the same way. And that was really kind of one of the first times we saw that kind of naked partisanship in redistricting in Nebraska. Not to say that Nebraska's always done it perfectly. In fact, they've always done it a little bit differently each time they've taken it up. But for the most part, you know, there was an urban-rural split that might pop up. There was definitely some shenanigans involved from time to time as politicians tried to protect their own self-interest, but it really didn't have that naked partisanship until the 2010-2011 cycle. And I just knew there had to be a better way. So from that point forward, you know, we've really been looking at what other states have been doing to try and reform that broken system and to really put the power back into the people. And so there's legislative proposals we can talk about today. There's a really exciting ballot initiative that's been filed, and there's all kinds of community engagement opportunities for all Nebraskans to take a part in, so that we can really get it right in the next go around.
Thank you. We're really lucky today because both ACLU and Civic Nebraska are coalition partners with Nebraskans for Independent Redistricting. And so I think that that's extra special about our panelists tonight. So thank you. And Jody, do you mind wrapping up our introductions?
Sure. I feel like a little bit like the outlier, but I'm really happy to be here because everybody here are people that I admire, and the work that everyone is doing in our community, whether that's Film Stream, Civic Nebraska, ACLU, and then my colleague Kirsten, obviously at UNO. You know, I think that, yeah, I'm happy to join this group. I'm an educator, so I'm not an activist, at least with my formal hat on, but I'm also somebody who lives in this community. And so, you know, for 20 plus years, I have tried to learn what I can about how, you know, the politics and the policies work in Nebraska. And there's a lot of things I think that are so admirable about what we have here. And particularly things like the unicameral, where, you know, it's so unique. And I also find that this is a community that is, you know, hungry to be engaged. In all the work that I do in the community, I find, you know, such an enthusiasm for, you know, grassroots activism. And I think that's one of the reasons why this movie really appealed to me, because we get to, you know, we get to sort of see that story told, and we can talk about it and maybe how we, you know, how it resonates with things in our own community. But yeah, I'm an educator, so I'm always interested in you know, helping people learn more about politics and about our community. And I also have been involved in, you know, some community-based education, whether that's through things like study abroad, but also service learning on our own campus. And as a metropolitan university, the University of Nebraska Omaha, I think we have a role that is important to play on these kinds of issues. I mean, you know, we like to talk about our campus being the community. And I think in a way that really resonates when we can have opportunities like this to, you know, engage, you know, even outside the boundaries of our campus. mean, we're all outside the boundaries of the campus right now, let's be honest. So being in our own homes, we're able to connect this way, I think is so great. And so I really appreciate, thank you, Angie, for inviting me to be involved in this. And I'm happy to join in discussion on whatever we can.
Thank you, Jody. And I would say that you're definitely an advocate. I see you out there doing so many great things in the community, especially for women and girls, and just serving organizations that are in the trenches. So thank you for being a part of the panel today too. Just as a reminder, you can post questions on to the Facebook Live itself. Angie's helping us keep an eye out for that. But we have a couple questions to get us started, but please do send your questions in because we want to hear from you too and to get to what's on your mind. But the first thing I just want to talk about is just what's your reaction to this film? You know, and what was missing from it too, I think would be a good thing as well.
Big question.
I think off the back, my reaction was, what a great film. I'd heard from our one of our organizers, Mike, about this movie before I even got asked to be on this panel, and he was just raving about it. And so then when I got the opportunity to watch it, I was really amazed by the story, especially about getting on Facebook and just posting like, hey, who wants to do redistricting? And I'd actually met her, I forget her name, who led that effort Katie at a conference, and heard her story before, and even hearing it again, seeing that movie, it's just so amazing. And it really just goes to the power of the grassroots, and that when people decide that they're going to get engaged, they're going to protect their voting rights and protect their democracy, anything is possible.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You got to meet Katie at a conference.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I agree with Brad, and big shout out to Film Streams for all of their incredible work in the community, and also for the generous invitation to join with y'all today. I mean, I love this intersection of art and activism, which you center in your work daily. And it's just always so vibrant and so powerful. And I think that was really encapsulated in the Slay the Dragon movie, right? Where, you know, we're right there with the organizers in Michigan, right? Our hearts are high when they're high. We're, you know, on the edge of our seat and like kind of biting our nails as they're going through the slings and arrows of the process. And then they have those ultimate huge successes. And so I think that the storytelling itself was it just really resonated with me. It was such a powerful way to not only share their story, but to inspire others to be involved. And, you know, I am so biased because I love our Nebraska legislature so much. But I also have a deep and abiding respect for the power of direct democracy. And in Nebraska, you know, we're one of the, well, I think what are there, Brad, now about, 20 states or so that have some aspect of direct democracy available, initiative, referendum, recall, those kinds of key components that, you know, emanated out of that populist movement. And in Nebraska, you know, we have such a strong constitutional protection for those rights. And that is our second house. The people are our second house. And so many times when either the legislature gets it wrong and they're not being responsive and people take matters in their own hand, or on the flip side, you know, the people are just so out far in front of their legislators on a lot of key issues, they decide to take power into their own hands. And I know when I ran the Nebraska Minimum Wage Initiative in 2014, which happened via citizen initiative, that was just such a powerful process to, you know, crisscross the state, talk to your neighbors, get those petitions signed, engage in really deep conversations about what a minimum wage increase might mean for their family or their community. And then, seeing it all the way through and seeing that impact, which is just, a scale, which is so exciting. And we saw that happen with Katie, and we see that happen with citizen initiatives all over the country and right here in Nebraska. And so I think it was a really sound depiction of the power of that process, but it also helped to shine a light on the complexities therein as well. And I think that in a lot of ways, how organic and how grassroots her effort truly was in today's modern era is more of an outlier than something you typically see, where it takes a lot of money and a lot of resources to get something on the ballot. Even in states that have those robust direct democracy kind of rights. But we've seen it happen here in Nebraska on a host of different issues in the past. I think it will happen this cycle, and I think it will happen moving forward. So, I think overall it was a great film. It was really powerful to me. But I do think that, there's a lot of times people are like, oh, we'll just run a ballot initiative. There's a lot of steps that go into finding all of those signatures, from the legal to the policy to the practical. But when you find the sweet spot and you find that issue that people really agree upon, it's such a powerful tool to move and to really effectuate change and change that we can all be a part of and take into our own hands.
Excellent. I was thinking also when I saw this film about the idea that, I think there's probably a lot of people out there who think, oh, a documentary, snooze fest, I'm not so interested. But documentaries are so great. They, first of all, they always come from a particular point of view. So it's not like you have to take in the whole world at one time. There's a narrative there. And I'm fortunate enough that I get to teach a class on politics and film. So sometimes, we look at the things through the lens of how we understand them. And so seeing a documentary like this, I think really, it's very engaging. I found myself sort of, at moments kind of in tears even, because of the power because it's real, and it's something that's happening and being affected by real people. The other thing is that in films, having like lawyers, judges, politicians, these are all elements that make great film subjects because of their capacity for both good and evil. And they also, they have, their actions have the ability to affect so many people. And so these are like natural dramatic elements that we get to see kind of unfold in this story in, I think, a really, exciting way. And, I'm not an expert on the sort of the art side of filmmaking, but I think it was pretty masterful from that side as well. And then having citizen activists, the grassroots activism aspect, I think, anybody can relate to that, because you see, Katie at the beginning as this, she's a regular person, and she happens to post a post on Facebook social media saying, hey, I'm interested in this issue. Does anybody else want to work on this with me? And to sort of see the story unfold from that, and to kind of see the power and the drama, and the way that an individual, in concert with a bunch of other individuals who care about this issue, are able to have an impact. And then also to see the limitations of that, I think, through this process. We definitely see both the possible and the barriers to affecting social change in our society. It's got all the elements. If you haven't seen the film yet, you need to see the film.
I agree. I know that I texted Angie when I was done watching it, and I was like, I'm fired up. Let's go do something. So it definitely speaks to that power of the people. So I think it'd be helpful if we could just briefly discuss what gerrymandering is in simple terms. And I always talk about things like, what does it feel like? What does it sound like? What does it, how would you know that's what's going on. And I'm not sure who would like to take that, but I think it'd just be helpful because it's one of those things that I've even struggled with in trying to explain and talk to other people about. And that'd be a good place for us to lay a foundation.
Danielle, maybe you want to start it?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I was going to defer to you. And I also want to take your film and politics class, by the way. I also want to do that. So yeah, I mean, the really quick kind of definition here is, so the term itself, which is kind of a weird, wonky, technical term, is got deep roots, historical roots, right? Way back in the day when there were all kinds of shenanigans going around with districts in, where was it? Help me, Massachusetts. Yeah. And the governor there, I think, was Eldridge Gary. And they drew these really bananas looking maps that looked like a salamander. And so then the press at the time kind of smushed it together, kind of like a Benifer situation or something, and called it the gerrymander. And so that kind of stuck. And then from there on, whenever you get these really odd shaped districts, it's usually kind of a red flag or an indication that there's something going on there. And the something going on there can be a lot of different things, right? It can be partisan based. It can be to suppress racial minority votes and to dilute their power and their strength. It can be just incumbent protection sometimes in trying to ensure that the voters who are drawing their districts, take care of themselves and consolidate their power. So the motive behind gerrymandering takes a lot of different forms. It has in Nebraska, it has over the years, it has in other jurisdictions. And I think what's really at the heart of this movie, and really something that's come online in more recent times, is the impact of partisan gerrymandering. So I think there are definitely some of those egregious districts out there that just make no sense. When you look at kind of a geographical map and then you end up having all of these twists and turns and little carve outs, like, that's usually, like I said, a good indication. But I think it's even perhaps hard to discern sometimes, and even more insidious when it's less apparent when you look at it. And it can be just a little shave here, a little shave there, a little carve out, a little pack, a little crack. And as technology becomes more sophisticated, it is really hard to discern sometimes. And so there's been a boatload of litigation about whether or not partisan gerrymandering is constitutional or permissible. There's been a lot of citizen efforts to reform redistricting to try and take partisanship out, either through something as simple as prohibiting partisanship in redistricting, to creating citizen commissions that are independent, to providing for a state demographer or a state researcher, more in kind of a nonpartisan kind of bureaucratic kind of office to really have the power in drawing those maps. So different states have tackled this in different ways, because the people understand how dangerous this is and how pervasive this is becoming, and how it really, strikes a blow in terms of our democratic values. So different states have really formatted different solutions to try and make our system less rigged and more fair for everybody, for voters of color, for voters across the political spectrum, and to ensure that no incumbent, gets a free ride and that they remain accountable to the voters. So I think that was well documented in the movie. I think it's a good overview of how different states are handling it. And in Nebraska, again, we haven't seen some of these really truly egregious looking districts, but we have started to see dramatic shifts in terms of elevating partisan interests for political gain in the redistricting process, particularly in CD2 and some of the other legislative districts, which is kind of starting to play out. In the local level, I can tell you in Lancaster County, there was a lot of discussion about how our county commissioner districts created what they call a donut hole, where in the middle there was a district that was, you know, widely favored progressives and Democrats in the heart of the city, in the core of the city, in the neighborhoods. And then all those other districts, you know, just kind of they were far more competitive than they might be otherwise. And so it definitely happens in the congressional level, all the way down to those local offices. And that's a long-winded explanation.
Great.
You gotta watch out because I'll filibuster. So you gotta get that hook out. Yeah.
That's really great, though. Thank you. And I think one of the things that the film really highlighted for us is the importance of the census when it comes to redistricting. And Brad, I was wondering if you could maybe speak a little bit to that, and others if you want to jump in. But, you know, what is the role of the census when it comes to this, and why is this so important that everybody's being counted?
So the census is the data that we use to draw maps. Now, we get a lot of data, and when you do it in kind of a third party, like behind closed doors way, you can add in kind of other data to help you draw a map that'll be more beneficial to whoever you're trying to make it beneficial for. But the census data is what's really all going to be based on. So the counts, so how many people live in the area will determine that district. And so when we think about who is usually undercounted in the census, it's the areas where people usually also are kind of underrepresented in our government. So areas where you have, you know, Black, Hispanic people, those areas are also usually undercounted. So when we're drawing a district, we want to make sure that all those people are counted, so that we are able to have districts that look like the state of Nebraska. Every time I go to the state capitol, I'm always disappointed because usually it's me and then Senator Wayne and Senator Chambers. And those are usually the only African Americans I see in the Capitol throughout the course of my work. So it's just one of those things. If we want that to change, we have to be able to change redistricting. And to do that, we have to change who's counted in the census and make sure that everyone's counted and that we're all being represented when those districts are being drawn. So that's why the census plays such a huge role.
Absolutely. I think I'm sorry, Jody, did you have something too?
Well, I was just going to say, I think Brad highlighted really well the idea that you know, it's a noble thing to use census data to update, you know, district drawing, because we want them to be, you know, we want the counts to be right in order to have, you know, sort of same size districts. The issue with gerrymandering, and again, it's possible to look at it from different perspectives. And so this is what kind of makes it so insidious to try to advocate for change, because, you know, one person's, you know, overt partisanship is another person's freedom of speech. And so you can see the way that these things kind of play out in the contentious world of politics. But you know, drawing districts is necessary. I mean, redrawing districts is necessary. Redistricting is necessary. The question is, how do you do it in a way that that seems fair? And again, I think that that's where, you know, the devil's in the details about how do you define what's fair. On the one hand, we can talk about, well, you know, the way that it's typically done in the United States is that the party that is, you know, kind of controlling the legislature has the opportunity to do the drawing as a majority party. And the problem is that everybody who's an incumbent has an incentive to try to maintain that incumbency and to maintain safe districts and to maybe even grow your party's influence. And so it's not something that's only been wielded by one party historically. But it's, I think the movies, is giving you this very contemporary look at this. And so we're seeing it, through the process with majority Republicans, but it has been used by parties, different parties. And it's kind of inherent in the process. I mean, an interesting thing, if you think about it, is because we have to draw districts, what should the rules be for drawing these things? I mean, we don't have gerrymandering for the Senate, the US Senate, because the districts are permanent. They're the state boundaries. And so for better or for worse, I mean, people will criticize, the representation on that side of things too, but that's something that's fixed versus trying to update your information to draw new lines for districts of other types, namely, the US House of Representatives, but also for state legislative districts and even for the local level.
Thank you.
And I think one thing kind of with that is just when we think about gerrymandering, just the leap it's taken so quickly over the past 10, 20 years. And Danielle, I know you touched on this, but when redistricting was happening before, it was essentially like people were using a flip phone, and now we're using an iPhone, and just the difference between those two and the amount of data that's out there about every one of us, where you're not just seeing where people are at now, but you're predicting where people are going to live for the next 10 years and how you can still be able to win an election for the next 10 years, even once people move around and new shopping centers and things like that open up and there's total population changes. That's the level of data we're working with now. So it totally changes the game. And it's the difference between when people were doing it on a flip phone or even just the old house phone versus an iPhone now. And that's, to me, why it's so important that we deal with it now, because that leap has been taken.
There's no way to put the genie back in the bottle in terms of information, because we have the information now. And that is, both of you made that point so well, that the era of big data means that we have the ability to get data at such a granular level that informs, for good and bad, the way that we do things. I mean, the term gerrymandering has even gone outside of the districting side. We talk about gerrymandering now, which is basically using that kind of, very intricate information data about things like, race, ethnicity, income, socioeconomic status, all of these kinds of things, to even make decisions about who is going to, who you're going to put on a jury. So the idea of nefarious use of information to, to sort of make the rules and stack the decision-making bodies is even broader than just gerrymandering.
Yeah, and I think there's so many interesting policy choices and decisions and discussions that are embedded in the census that is like the precursor to the redistricting and the gerrymandering, right? Like, and we're starting to have some of these conversations in Nebraska in a more robust way, right? Like, how do we count Nebraskans who are incarcerated? Do we count them where they're forcibly detained? Do we count them in their home communities? And that has a huge difference, makes a huge difference, right? When we're trying to figure out where population is and how to ensure everybody has equal representation. Same for students, same for folks who are unsheltered or experiencing homelessness. All of those kinds of pieces get baked into it, kind of like the undercount issues that Brad was talking about as well. And so, I think that there's just so many fascinating policy discussions that you overlay on the data, right? The data is not static. The data actually, it has a lot of policy decisions and a lot of politics baked into it. And so those are even some like early things that we can be talking about right now as we work through this historic census, right? And, I think there's so many unanswered and really interesting and really frustrating questions surrounding like, okay, now all the census deadlines are getting pushed back because of the pandemic. What does that mean for redistricting next year when all of that data might be delivered in a much later time than we normally see it? You know, how exactly does that work? And we want to see a complete count, but we also need to move forward with those other pieces. So, you know, these are all really novel questions that we're all trying to work through together, and that kind of add another layer of uncertainty and complication to the discussion.
So one thing that a few of you have referenced to is this idea of the different intentions behind some of these decisions over time. And so I think it's important that we are acknowledging the difference between racial and partisan gerrymandering. And so could any of you speak to how historical policies like redlining, for example, have impacted what we see today with redistricting, and how that's impacting some of our unrepresented populations or underrepresented?
It's definitely played a huge role, especially when we think about gerrymandering. Even just the idea that a lot of times when certain areas have been gerrymandered in the past, a lot of people think it's good at first because you know, if you gerrymander the Black part of town or the Hispanic part of town, well, now you might be able to have a minority representative where you wouldn't have been able to have one before. But then there's also the flip side of it where now in other districts, your voice doesn't matter. So I think that's one of the big way it affects everything is it almost puts each person being torn between, do I want somebody who looks like me and understands me representing me, or do I want to make sure that my community is represented throughout all of our different districts?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Actually, Brad, right? Like I've been reading a lot about that because it's kind of an open secret as different states are litigating some of these issues, right? Where they're saying like, oh no, we weren't doing a gerrymander based on racial reasons. We were doing a gerrymandering based on partisan reasons. So it's all good, court. And these lawyers have started to dig into all of this like legislative emails and all these documents and all these spreadsheets and whatever. And they're finding, you know, number one, some really disturbing, very explicit, sophisticated strategies where partisan interests are, quote unquote, encouraged to reach out to minority communities and cut a deal. Like, we're going to go ahead and make sure that you're taken care of and you're going to have strong representation, but then you're going to work with us on these other pieces. And, you know, it remains an open question whether or not something like that's permissible, but it's literally an open secret that's happening in state after state after state. And I think Brad's exactly right too, that, you know, there's so much baked into it outside of just the census or just the redistrict, the economic, social, cultural, you know, trends and facts that belie our lives are amplified when we are in this kind of political arena. And you really see that kind of inequity and injustice that we see in our work and fight against every day. You know, it really explodes when you start to draw the districts.
Well, and we also know that people do segregate racially and ethnically and socioeconomic status based. And so there's all of these things. So you'll hear people who will defend, you know, maybe a particular districting model and say, well, you know, okay, yeah, there's, you know, you might see these patterns, but it's because that's where people live. And so this is, yeah, if you get, I mean, Democrats tend to concentrate in urban areas. And so that's just the way that things are. So, you know, these things are going to be reflected, but you'll also see opponents of a particular districting plan say, well, this is, you know, I mean, maybe that there are these historical things, but there's also the impact, as you mentioned, Kirsten, about things like redlining that have, you know, have created social structures that actually exacerbate the kinds of disparities that we see, that exist in patterns of where people live. And so how do you untangle all of these things to then say, this is the perfect this is the perfect districting model. I mean, I think one of the keys is to find the smoking gun, so to speak, of you don't often get the good plot line that we saw in this film, that you have recordings of the people drawing the boundaries saying, this is what we did, ha 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 ha. I mean, usually only in fiction films do we see that kind of that kind of smoking gun and sort of evil intent revealed. But I think that's one of the things that I liked about this film, is that how did they get that? That's awesome,
right.
That they were able to show that kind of plot twist. But your point about I think that there are a lot of different things, a lot of different factors that go into these sort of complex patterns that we see, and untangling what is a intentional versus a unintentional concentration or disaggregation of particular populations is really tough.
We got a question from the audience, so that's very exciting. Thank you. So the question is, what were some of the lessons learned that could be applied to the state of Nebraska from this film?
Just real quick, I want to shout out Ayana Boykins for the question. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna.
Hello, friend. Yeah. I mean, I think a couple of different things. First is, I think it was pretty clear in the documentary, and has mirrored our experience, unfortunately, in Nebraska thus far, is that there's very little appetite in political circles to reform the system. And Jody's right, no one party has kind of a corner on partisan shenanigans when it comes to these kinds of political issues and political questions. But what we've seen in Nebraska is that, after a really acrimonious, really painful redistricting process, so out of line with our political culture in 2011, there's been reform after reform after reform measure proposed in the legislature, and they've not seen the light of day. They've had late hearings. Most haven't been advanced out of committee until very, very recently. And even modest things like, hey, we should all use the same software for redistricting. Oh no, we can't do that. To creating an independent citizens commission, to having more transparency, to reducing partisanship. And they just can't get any traction in the legislature, who's made up of a lot of really caring, thoughtful people. But on this issue, it shows that the political will amongst the political class is very small, and they have a big stake in protecting the status quo. And so I think one thing that the film really spoke to me about was that if you want to see significant systemic change on this issue, it's almost always going to have to come from the people, through a citizen initiative, through direct democracy. And if you're counting on the courts to save you, I think that the jurisprudence and the precedent has been pretty clear. They're not interested in tangling in particularly partisan gerrymandering issues. Now, I think that the courts have done a better job of protecting minority voting rights. But on the partisan issue, on the partisan gerrymandering issue, they've said, hey, states, it's up to you to figure it out. We're not getting involved. So the courts are out, the legislature's out, that leaves us. And that's okay, because we're up to the challenge.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think it's all it's going to be up to the people to stand up for it, especially because right now, because of gerrymandering, it makes it harder for people to have an influence that way. So it is going to be up to grassroots efforts through initiatives and things like that, and getting counted in the census to make sure you're deciding how your district looks and not your legislator.
Mm-hmm.
So one question I have around that is, what does that look like? So I'm just somebody in the community that cares about this issue. What does that type of community activism engagement look like?
I mean, when I think about engagement, I think there's such a wide range of ways people can engage. You can be making phone calls, you can be, to your family, to your friends, you can be writing letters, you can be having conversations with people. Right now, you can be texting people. There's so many different ways to get involved, but I think this film is a great way to get involved. Maybe once all the pandemic stuff is over, or even before then, if somebody does like the Zoom movie watching together, like show this to your friends, show this to your family so they understand what's going on. Because one thing I've seen is that when people hear about gerrymandering and really dig into redistricting and the process of it, I've never met someone who's like, oh yeah, that's okay. Like, yeah, no, I'm fine with my vote being diluted. Like, I've never met someone like that. So the biggest thing, the first step is getting people to know about it and understand it's happening. So that's why I would say, do a Zoom movie night with your friends where everyone goes and watches this film. So just more people have a grasp of what's happening, because a lot of times once people know what's happening, they're ready to take action and to fix it. But not enough people right now realize what's happening and realize that our democracy is being like attacked right now. So we gotta get people to understand that. And this film does such a great job highlighting that.
Well, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jody, please.
Oh, I was going to actually hand it off to you, because I was thinking that this group, there is a group in Nebraska that is trying to promote, some kind of taking the power out of the hands of the politicians to do the redistricting. And I remember a few years ago reading an article about Iowa's, redistricting board and thinking, oh, well, shouldn't all states have a board like that? The problem is the people that get to decide that that's going to be the group that does it are the people who currently hold the power, who are usually the politicians in power. So it becomes it's like very difficult for them to sort of, and I think that's what you're alluding to, Danielle, too, in the talking about sort of what's the stomach on the part of our legislators to make those kinds of changes. And I don't have the answer to this question, but I might throw it off to one of you to what is the status of that particular movement in Nebraska? And if it relies on signatures, what does that mean in a pandemic?
Yeah, there's a lot there. Yeah, so just to dovetail off of all of that, I'll say a couple of things. Once folks are educated, and this is an increasingly hot topic as we get closer to it, right? I know from being a senator that some of the most powerful communications that come into your office are the simplest, are literally, dear Senator Conrad, I live in your district. I care about gerrymandering. What are you doing? Get back to me. Thanks. I mean, you got to express yourself however you see fit, but usually not all caps, keep the swears to a minimum. But like, I think that so often we devalue or undervalue the power we have as citizens and the power that we have as voters. And just, we think, oh, well, we're not, a PhD like Jody, or we're not a community organizer expert like Brad. So like, I'm not really qualified to get in the mix here. Literally, those simple conversations, those really simple communications are super powerful. The other thing is that, pro tip, a lot of people start off their day and they have their coffee and they open the paper and they turn to the sports scores. Well, normally, not now, but right, normally. Politicians start off their days on the editorial pages. So they're looking to see what the op-eds are. They're looking to see what the letters to the editor are. Again, a relatively underutilized, simple way to get the issue in the mix, to let your opinion be known, and to really make sure it's on politicians' radar screen and thought leaders' radar screens, like the ones who write the editorials, when they start to see that bump up. So that's some other community engagement stuff that I would definitely encourage folks to take advantage of. And then when it comes to Nebraskans for Redistricting, so wow, how the world has changed in so many ways in such a short period of time, you know, but right before the world did change and before it really came to hit home in Nebraska, a really robust coalition, including ACLU, Holland Children's Movement, League of Women Voters, Civic Nebraska, Common Cause, Nebraska Appleseed, starting the outreach, the NAACP and beyond, you know, kicked off and launched a historic ballot initiative to change our state constitution to create an independent citizens commission. So you can go on the Secretary of State's website, you can take a look at the language that's out there. It's been approved, it's been vetted through the process. And we are just getting out ready to hit the streets with those beautiful petitions and start gathering all the signatures, which are due the beginning of July to make it to the November ballot. And we weren't able to run a traditional drive at this juncture and at that juncture because, you know, we wanted to ensure that we put public health needs first, and we're all trying to keep safe and keep our community safe. So where the petition drive is today is monitoring the situation, trying to see if there is a reopening, is there a safe way to gather signatures? I think that's still an open question that a lot of campaigns are struggling with in Nebraska and beyond. There's definitely been, you know, a hard look at alternative signature gathering methods, you know, using the mail more robustly, exploring electronic signature collection activities, whether or not that's permissible under Nebraska law. Some states have gone to court or sought an exemption or exception under their existing signature gathering laws because of COVID, to be able to strike the right balance, to keep the rights of petition robust, but to protect public health. So unfortunately, our state leaders in Nebraska have been resistant to those calls, but rest assured, no one's throwing in the towel at Nebraskans for Independent Redistricting. So I'd expect to see some more announcements from the campaign coming up. There is a website, there is social media pages that you can go sign up to get updates and to volunteer, because they still need volunteers at this level. And no matter what happens, you know, if the ballot initiative isn't able to move forward, then you put it back to the legislature, right? They're going to have to take this up. There's pending bills in the legislature for the remaining 17 days when they come back that have a lot of promise and a lot of opportunity. And then in 2021, you know, the legislature will have to reset the redistricting rules as they do every 10 years. And that's another opportunity for engagement. So no matter what happens, and believe me, we're not throwing in the towel, expect to see more there. There's going to be a concerted push for redistricting reform in Nebraska. And I'm hopeful that we'll see it on our ballots this fall, but if not, we'll find lots of ways to keep it in the mix and keep people involved.
Well, I love that so many different ways of being engaged have been discussed. So whether it's making phone calls or texting people, doing a view party, to getting involved in this coalition, I think there is a little bit of something for everybody. And that's, again, speaks to my heart. So we all have the power to do something, and it's just figuring out what's the right match for us. And none of us have to do it all, but together we can accomplish so much. The next question that I actually have from a viewer is very relevant to this topic. So this work takes time. It could take a lot of time. And so the question is about advocacy burnout. And so in your experience, what's the best way to encourage our peers who are younger, but I think any of us, to stay energized and involved in these issues as they get out of the university environment into the dull real world. But really this burnout can happen to any of us. And so how do you maintain momentum, keep that fire burning, knowing that a lot of these issues are going to take a lot of time and effort to accomplish the ultimate goals?
For me, I always think about, especially when you say, how do you keep like younger folks involved in that way? For me, I guess that's what always keeps me going and pushes me, is knowing that I'm 27 and there's a lot of people who've been working on the stuff I'm working on 3-4 times as long as I've been alive. So it's my job now to do it. So that's what kind of pushes me and keeps me going, is just the fact that like other people have done it before me and they're probably tired now. So I just look at it as my time to step up and to do my part. So yeah, I would also say that for me, the other thing that keeps me going is volunteers. Like you, I know you do some volunteering for us as a voting rights advocate, and just in general, volunteers bring me so much happiness in my life. Like they're always ready to do the work, and even if they don't want to do that particular thing, the fact that anybody shows up totally for free, just out of the goodness of their heart, it just energizes me. It wakes me up. It gets me going. It's like the best cup of coffee ever. So
working with students helps, because you're constantly seeing a new group of young people who have ideals and want to see those put into action, and they tend to not see the barriers sometimes, because they are, they're blissfully ignorant of, oh, well, this has been tried last, that did, so they don't have that defeatism that sometimes I think, can, that, and that kind of sanguine attitude that can sometimes come around. Also, I'm a parent, and so I'm constantly thinking about, what am I modeling for, my kids? Full disclosure, I should mention that my daughter is finishing up an internship at Civic, Nebraska. So I feel like that was a win. That was a win that she saw that as an organization that, that she said, oh, this organization is caring about some of the things that I'm caring about. I mean, we get also, and we, Kirsten, you can jump in on this too, because we see, all kinds of students and people in the work that we do that have different viewpoints. They don't all agree on these things. I mean, I think whenever you can bring groups across different partisan divides even together on things that they care about. And I think things like citizen action is a way to do that. I also think that it's easy to look at, I mean, in some ways, this is like the best of all issues to model that on, because you can see clearly, well, this doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Well, what does make sense? And to start having those discussions, whether they are bounded by political parties, or they're bounded by, other kinds of value sets. It's easy to root for this kind of change, because you can say, well, this is trying to address something that seems to be a problem. And so I think whenever you can frame an issue like that, which is why I like the way that this film was done, because I think it does it so clearly. That energizes people too.
Yeah, I know we are lucky enough to get to work with a lot of law clerks and interns at ACLU of Nebraska, and they continually renew my spirit and faith in humanity. And so I really feel like they're, what is it now? Generation Y, millennials, whatever they are, shows how old I am. I don't even know what the current generation is. But I think sometimes they get a bad rap, like, oh, they're so self-interested, or they're just all about social media. And, the young people that we see in our office and in our community engagement work across the state are really involved in their communities and think really deeply about these and other social political issues that they care about. And, one thing that I would definitely kind of tee up when it comes to the redistricting discussion is like, it seems kind of complex, or it seems kind of technical, and like, oh yeah, that's not really my passion. My passion's criminal justice reform, or sensible drug policy, or reproductive rights, or environmental justice. Yay, good, all of that, all of the above. But this is the linchpin, right? Like, without a fair set of rules and fair and equitable elections and thoughtful representation, it makes all the other stuff harder, right? When the deck is really stacked against you and what you believe and what you value. So that's how we usually try and get younger audiences excited about voting rights and reform and redistricting and things of that nature, where maybe they haven't seen the kind of oppression, right, that previous generations have experienced. So that's just not as tangible, even though they are living through the era of voter ID and some of those other really scary tactics, and they get it really quickly because it impacts young people in a really profound way. So, I mean, I think that would be the first piece. And then the second piece is just, you know, I'll tell you, speaking for myself as a progressive person in Nebraska and having served as a very progressive state legislator in a very conservative body, the only fights that you lose are the ones that you don't even try to fight, right? Like, even if you know going in, your ideas probably aren't going to carry the day on that particular issue. It's important to let your community know that, you know, Nebraska doesn't speak with one voice on those issues. It's important to build a record for prosperity. You learn a lot more about the issues as you dig in. You meet cool people you would have never met, even if they don't agree with you on this or other topics that really challenge you and change your ideas and enrich your life. So I love everything about politics. and I know there's a lot of yucky stuff that goes along with it, but there's also a lot of really awesome stuff. And we're so lucky in Nebraska because anybody who wants to be involved can find a way to be involved. There's awesome civic organizations. Both political parties are really busy and have lots of opportunities. There's awesome candidates up and down the ballots, always hungry for volunteers. And there's a lot of great outlets for civic engagement through schools and even at their homes, right? I mean, I know my second grader is always looking for creative ways to like petition her principal about the lunchroom schedule or whatever. So, I mean, whatever your why is, whatever your driver is, there's an outlet for it through civic engagement. And, you know, that I really, truly believe it. I had this quote on my desk in the legislature and still have it in my office at ACLU. It's like an old I.F. Stone. I don't know if you've seen it, but like, you know, the only fights worth fighting are the ones you know you're going to lose and lose and lose and lose until someday somebody who thinks like you wins. And sometimes it takes a little bit of that, and that's okay too. But even when you lose, you don't lose.
You just got to keep on pushing it. So
yes.
This is a really good segue to any final thoughts that you all have. We've all talked about some calls to action, but if you want to re-highlight those. And Angie, if it's possible, maybe later we could go in and put some links on the Facebook page.
Definitely. I will.
Attached to this video.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to just say one thing I'll add. It's not a call to action, but I do want to get it out there is Civic Nebraska's voter hotline in case anybody runs into any issues with this primary, whether they're voting by mail, which we really, really want you to do. And the deadline is coming up soon. So please send in your vote by mail request. Yeah. But if you don't listen to me, you still vote in person, we still want to help you out and make sure you're able to use that right. So I'm going to read it off so I don't screw up the number, but if you need any help, you can reach out to Civic. The number is going to be 402-890-5291. I'll do it again, 402-890-5291. And we can help out with any voter issues that anybody may run into.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Register, update your registration, know your rights, get those vote by mail applications, return those ballots. If that doesn't work out, figure out a safe way to vote on election day. Those are the squad goals in the near term. And then in the midterm, it's, make sure to send that quick note to your state legislator and say like, hey y'all, when you're going back and you got 17 days left, maybe elevate that redistricting reform a little bit. Senator McAllister has a great bill that was just kicked out of committee that's kind of sitting there, and there's some other good bills that are in play too. And so, and sign up for Nebraskans for Independent Redistricting Reform so you can get updates on the ballot initiative and other ways to be involved. And apologies to the awesome Film Stream staff for not getting our call to action work.
That's okay.
Time to be on the PowerPoint. Thank you for your grace and space in this pandemic moment, but we'll be happy to follow up. All of our websites have great information on them, and those are a good resource too.
Gosh, you guys have covered most of the things I could think of. I mean, the one thing I think sometimes people think is, if I'm not, I get people tell me all the time, well, I don't really care about politics, or I don't know about politics, or I'm not very political. And the thing is that politics is all around you, and we live in it. And so even if you think you're not being affected, you are being affected. And so you don't have to be a diehard partisan to be involved in issues that you care about. I think the point is to find something that you care about. I think we all, if nothing else, this pandemic is going to show us is that we are connected, and that what happens to one happens to the rest of us. And so I think I'm hoping that one of the positive things that might come out of this is a real, need and impetus for people to get involved and connect with other people. And so you can really find, any issue that you care about, or even just find the people that seem to care about the things that you do and see what kinds of things that they're involved in. A book club can become political. I made a shout out there, Angie, you saw that. A citizens group, trying to get something involved. One of my favorite groups that I've gotten involved in is in my neighborhood, because we cared about what was happening to the park in our neighborhood. We were trying to figure out how can we do things that might help improve. And then all of a sudden we became political activists because we were talking to the parks director, and we were, meeting with the city council. And so, I think if you find something that you care about, it's easy to find a way to get involved to improve.
Thank you. I'm going to throw in my own shout out opportunity, and that's with Civic Nebraska as a voter rights advocate. It's a really easy way to be involved in a variety of ways, and they provide great support to you. But there are groups out there all over the community that gather virtually and hopefully again in person. And so I host one of those groups once a month, and it's a great way to connect with people in the community, but to also have bite-sized action steps that we can take that do make a difference. And it is writing those letters, it's writing those editorials, it's making phone calls, and more importantly, it's being educated on the issues. And so I think that to your point, Jody, a lot of times it's that I don't understand this. And so I just can't do anything because I don't know. And we want to take that piece away. We want to make sure that folks are educated, they have the resources that they need so that they can take the action that makes sense to them. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. This was just such a joy, and it fills my heart and my soul knowing that there are just so many folks out there that just really care about the citizens of our state and care about our communities and representation and just being engaged. So thank you. Thank you, Film Streams, for hosting us and bringing us together in this virtual space, and to all of our friends that have been watching, either now or in the future. It's been great spending time with you. I'm going to turn this over to Angie to close us out.
Well, I just want to say thanks to all of you for the time and the expertise and the effort, and getting all my emails and bothering you about this and that. But thank you for participating in this. And, you know, I think that we were all, with the pandemic happening, you don't know how community is going to be forming. You don't know how things are going to look moving forward. And, you know, Film Streams really is, I'm so in love with my job, but Film Streams really is that kind of space where you get to talk about big ideas. And our community development program really showcases that and gives a platform for a lot of different people and different issues. And so I was, you know, the work from home thing, I don't know how to do that, but you know what, you guys, I just feel so inspired by this and so grateful and so lucky to have people like you in my state, my home. So anyway, if you haven't seen the film, go to filmstreams.org, our home movies programming. A portion of the rental fee profits our organization, and in a time like this where we're not having daily sales, you know, so that really helps. Thanks to our members and donors, and any other things links that we need, I'll put on the Facebook event page, and I think that's it. Thanks a lot, guys.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good one, everybody.